If the room is speaking, I can't hear anything.
Me either.
Looks like they're muted now.
All right, here we are. Hello,
There we go.
everybody.
Hello.
Hi. All right, so it's 2:30. Today is Monday, February 12th, and it is a call to order the special meeting of the Civil Service Commission with the land acknowledgement, which is the City of Seattle Civil Service Commission acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish. We honor with gratitude the land and the Duwamish people, past and present. And with that, I would offer an opportunity for all attendees to introduce themselves. I will start. My name is Mary Weidman-Williams. I am the current chair of the Civil Service Commission and the mayoral appointed commissioner. So I will go to my right, to my fellow commissioner. We'll go around the room here and then on to those who are joining us virtually.
My name is Ray Caesar, the newly elected employee commissioner.
Sarah Butler, Civil Service Commission's Policy and Operations Advisor.
I'm Andrea Shealy. I'm the Executive Director of the Civil Service Commission.
And I'm Teresa Jacobs, the Executive Assistant.
Okay, and Commissioner McMillan, can you get us started for those virtual attendees?
Certainly. I'm Charlene McMillan, the council-appointed commissioner.
And I'm Joe Levan from the City Attorney's Office, and I'm legal counsel for the commission.
Hill, I am Rita Gray from SHR. I'm a learning partner over at Human Resources.
It looks like Ann Gold from the law department has just joined us. Here you are. All right, so again, welcome to everyone. There is no one in the room here, and it doesn't look like there's anyone on, any guests from the public on the WebEx platform. So I will assume that we don't have any public comment unless we have anything in writing received.
No.
Okay, with that being said, it is my duty then to kind of step us through the agenda. And we'll start that with item number 4. Everyone hopefully has gotten their packets. Item number 4 is the approval of minutes. And the agenda shows that we have minutes from January 29th, but we also have some unfinished business from our December 11th minutes. We did review them at our last meeting, but Commissioner McMillan was not with us in that meeting, and because Commissioner Caesar wasn't at the December 11th meeting, we were not able to do the approval of those. So I will offer the opportunity, Commissioner McMillan, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review the December 11th meeting minutes. They aren't in the packet, so
I'm sorry.
oh, you did? Okay. So it looks like she may have forwarded them to you, so we'll give you a moment, perhaps if you're in a position to pull those up.
I'm just doing that now. Just give me
Okay.
a minute.
And while she's doing that, maybe we can take a look at the January 29th meeting minutes that were in the packet. So Commissioner Caesar and Commissioner McMillan, I've reviewed them, and so I want to check, see if you have any thoughts, or anyone from the staff, anyone else have any feedback from those meetings. And if they look accurate and there are no corrections, then I will entertain a motion regarding their approval.
So approve the minutes for the January 29th, 24 special meeting.
Okay. And I will second that. All in favor? Aye. Commissioner McMillan?
Are we doing the 29th or the December
29th.
meeting?
The 29th. The ones
Okay, well, I
that are in
wasn't
the
at the
packet.
29th, but
She wasn't at that meeting. Oh, that's right, she wasn't at that meeting. Okay. It'll all work out, so we're good then, because we do have a quorum between the two of us, so we're good. All right, so now to back it up a step for the December 11th, then I will then entertain a motion from for the December 11th meeting minutes from Commissioner McMillan.
I'll move to approve it.
I second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Charlene, we're good for December 11th?
Yes, yes, I did move to approve. I don't think you heard me.
Okay, all right. All right. Well, that was a little clunky, but you know, we got through it and I think we're good for all the meeting. So thank you. And we'll move now to item number 5 is our guest presentation. I opened the meeting with our current land acknowledgement and at our recent, well, not so recent anymore, retreat a few months ago, we had a discussion about what's really behind the land acknowledgements, how are we making sure that we understand the significance and that we're not simply moving forward with a performative action. And it was suggested that we invite some expertise in the room. And so Rita Gray, this learning partner with SDHR, has graciously agreed to join us. And I know we've had lots of rescheduling and you've kind of been flexible and hung out with us on that. So we appreciate your being here today. And I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hatlahel Twog Alapu Ceab Rita Gray Sitsta. Hello, honorable people. My name is Rita Gray. I am Turtle Mountain Chippewa, and I'm a language student through the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe and the Puyallup Indian Tribe. I am currently a learning partner for SHR, and so I'm on the learning and development team. I've seen several faces on other meetings, so it's great to see you. Thank you for having me today. This is work that I'm really passionate about, and I'm always open to joining these meetings. So thank you for welcoming me into this space. Before I give the presentation, I'm just going to kind of give a little history of me and how I got here and how this project came to be. I am, like I mentioned, Turtle Mountain. My family comes from the Canadian and North Dakota area. I grew up in Kent and King County Housing Authority on East Hill, and I moved to Federal Way when I was 12. And my dad is Indigenous, my mom is Indigenous, and my dad committed suicide when I was 12, and I had a really challenging time with that. And a lot of my cultural experiences came through the jail and the prison system, and like active treatment centers for Indigenous males. And so that was a lot of my cultural experiences growing up. And my parents met at the Muckleshoot Alternative School for Native students. And so I've kind of always been in this area. I went to Federal Way High School, and I was a pretty average performing student. I did sports, but I didn't really have anyone pushing me until like my sophomore year. I had some teachers just really pushed me, and I became a first generation college student, first to graduate from high school, and a Bill Gates Millennium Scholar. So I had my undergrad and my master's degree paid for through that scholarship, and education really was a path for me to escape poverty and a lot of tragic events as well. And so I got on Google and I was like, what's the most expensive school in Washington? And I chose to go to Gonzaga. And in hindsight, I probably should have researched a little bit more. So I went on to Gonzaga and met my now husband there. And he played basketball at Gonzaga, went overseas. I finished my master's degree and then eventually went abroad with him for many years. My daughter speaks Greek. She was born in France. I taught at international schools, so I kind of got into learning and development from the K-12 academic path. And then during COVID, I had the opportunity to work at the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe. And that's a place that I thought I would work at forever, but I guess nothing is forever. And so while I was at Muckleshoot, I was a curriculum developer and I was responsible for developing culturally relevant curriculum. And I really had an awesome opportunity to touch a lot of amazing resources that aren't shared publicly, that are in their preservation office. And then I was really responsible for facilitating monthly staff trainings to help staff and teachers decolonize and indigenize their classrooms and workspaces. And that's really where my passion came in, being able to use like my personal background with my professional background and merge those together. And then last year about this time, this job posting kept popping up for me, and it kept popping up, and I kept ignoring it. And then I just felt a pull to really come to the city to bring my learning and development experience, but also to really indigenize non-Indigenous spaces, to step out of my comfort zone where I wouldn't hear Lachute Seed and I wouldn't be with Indigenous folks. And so it was a pretty rough transition at first, but I've found my way to make my path of the work I want to be doing. And this presentation came from Change Team and wanting a land acknowledgement resource. And you guys are the first group I'm sharing this with, but what's really exciting is this presentation has now turned into a tribal nations program that will be a training program hopefully launched within end of 2024 that's going to be available to all city staff members. And so it's really evolved, and yeah, it's just really, really important work that I think oftentimes gets ignored. And so, yeah, I'm going to walk you through this presentation. Please save questions for the end, so jot them down as they pop up. And yeah, thanks. So as I mentioned, this is a land acknowledgement resource. It kind of walks you through a little bit of history to get to the land acknowledgement, but the whole point of it is to walk away with a land acknowledgement resource. And so the objective for this presentation is for you guys to leave being able to identify who the original stewards of the greater Seattle area are, to be able to explain the importance of a non-performative land acknowledgement, and to be able to deliver an inclusive and accurate land acknowledgement that can be used in trainings, meetings, and workshops. And so before we begin, I work in learning and development, and we're all about data here. I'm going to ask you guys to complete a survey. Hopefully you guys have laptops or phones so that you can fill this out. I'm going to drop it in the chat if I know to get there.
Maybe you could push on the chat.
I'm going to stop sharing real quick so I can get the chat back because I saw it earlier. There it is. Okay, so let me know if this works for you guys. There's also the QR code you can scan, but there is a direct link as well.
No, it says it's an external site.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, you have to use the authenticator if you're going to use the QR code. Do you guys have your laptops or no?
no, most of us in
Okay.
the room don't.
It's okay. Honestly, it's not a big deal. I'll just send the post survey out, and if you can fill out the post survey, it'll be helpful. Usually folks have laptops, but yeah, it's kind of clunky. If you do the QR code and you don't have the authenticator app, it can just give you the error. So no worries there. Those of you that are online, are you able to open the link?
Yes, the first page was, it said external sites, but then you just click on it and then now I can see the survey.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to fill that out if that's okay.
Or since we're all not doing it, do you want to just proceed and we can do this after?
So what's important is actually the data from like the answers before you get the presentation. So I'm going to wait the couple minutes for you guys to finish it.
Okay.
But I appreciate that. Yeah, we just want to try to see what you guys know before you get the presentation.
Can you post the link one more time, Rita?
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's so hard to I don't do WebEx very often, and I'm like, where did the chat go? When you're sharing your screen, you like can't see the chat. So let me stop share real quick.
There we go.
Okay, I just dropped it again.
Thank you.
Yep.
Whoa.
It's-
Why is it doing that?
You know, that was my fault.
Okay, and can you guys see the QR code right now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes.
Have to log all in first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's easier to just use that. Or not.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're low technology.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm always kind of prepared for this, so I'm like, if it's really, really hard, we'll move on, but I always like to try because we do look at that data.
I'm gonna get it.
Finally.
Okay, about 1 more minute, and then I'm going to continue, but you can try to multitask. All right. So when we are thinking about a land acknowledgement, we really want to reflect on the history and the presence of Indigenous folks. And so to set the tone for the importance of a land acknowledgement, we want to talk about and think about some of the historical things that have happened to Indigenous people on Turtle Island. And when I say Turtle Island, I'm talking about America. Indigenous folks, that's what we refer to it as. Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Relocation Act in 1830, which was used to forcibly move Native Americans off their traditional land and into Indian territory. The philosophy during the boarding school era was literally to kill the Indian and save the man by Richard A. Pratt. By the early 1920s, roughly 83% of Indian school-age children attended a boarding school. My grandmother is a boarding school survivor. My husband's great-grandmother and great-grandfather are boarding school survivors. During the boarding school era, Native American code talkers invented a new type of military intelligence for the U.S. military. So Indigenous people were helping the U.S. military. However, Indigenous people were not granted citizenship until 1924. North America was home to more than 300 languages pre-contact. All but 2 Native American languages are in danger of disappearing by 2050. Language revitalization is really important to me. That's why I'm a language learner. And learning Lushootseed, also known as Tulshootseed. There are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. Only 2% of the current U.S. population is American Indians and Alaskan Natives. It was really important when I did the review process with several local tribal members and canoes members and the tribal relations officer from the mayor's office to emphasize that 2% shouldn't be used against us in recruiting and retention data. However, it is important to note that only 2%. And again, really emphasizing on the current presence and the history of Indigenous people on Turtle Island. Like I just mentioned, this resource was not just developed by me as an Indigenous person saying, hey, do this. It was developed in a good way. It was to create good medicine with, in collaboration with canoes members of locally federally recognized tribes, from the mayor's office with Tim Raynon. Lots of eyes have been on this, and what that means is lots of times little things are changing, right? It's an evolutionary resource where as people have input, it changes. So I like to share the live links because those are updated every so often. According to the National Museum of American Indians, a land acknowledgement is a traditional custom that dates back centuries in many Native nations and communities. Today, land acknowledgements are used when we participate in Canoe Journey. We just had Muckleshoot hosting the 2023 Canoe Journey this summer, and an act of a land acknowledgement was asking to come ashore. So if your traditional lands aren't this area, even if you're indigenous, you ask permission to come ashore. We also do our own form of land acknowledgement through a protocol, which is another type of ceremonial event. And so land acknowledgements are not just something that became because of colonization. Land acknowledgements have existed since time immemorial. They just look different now, and we encourage all Indigenous and non-Indigenous people to participate in them. However, it's really important to make sure that they're not performative and that you're reflecting on those histories and the current presence of Indigenous people. And while we're thinking about Indigenous people today, I want to note that in May 2023, Mayor Bruce Harrell met with several local tribal members and tribal leaders, urban native leaders, and they had a summit. It was the first summit to ever happen within the city. And within that summit report, there were several things that were identified to work on and that the city and the mayor want to see happen. There were 2 points that stood out to me that motivated me to create this resource, and one of them was education and awareness. So verbatim from that Tribal Nation Summit report, it says to provide city training and learning opportunities. City leaders and staff need to better understand tribal sovereignty, treaties, and tribal rights, and it goes on. So this is a data-driven project that I created. I didn't just choose to do it because it sounded fun. The city needs to be taking steps to educate folks on the Indigenous people of these lands. There was a second theme that stood out, which was cultural vitality and visibility. And it's really, since time immemorial, Coast Salish tribal communities have stewarded the land and waters of this region, including today's federally recognized tribes who continue to protect cultural resources. So it's to be investing Indigenous placemaking, bringing language into where we are, bringing Indigenous people into communication, and making sure that Indigenous presence is visible within the city. And so this Tribal Nation Summit report, again, really motivated me to develop this resource, but it also evolved into something bigger. And like I shared earlier, you guys are the first group I'm sharing this with, but I am now running the Tribal Nations program that we hope to launch by the end of 2024, and it's going to address a lot of these themes and really hopefully provide more training and learning opportunities for city leaders and employees.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. I wasn't sure if it was going to happen on my end because I had to get it approved for my department, and I'm just really, really thrilled that it's happening, and it's going to be a really fun project. And so the purpose of this resource was initially for SHR, right? I'm on change team, we're working on SHR, and as I started giving the presentation, folks were hungry and other departments wanted it. And so now it's evolved into a citywide resource that I'm also developing into an e-learning. So the first prerequisite of that Tribal Nations program is going to be an e-learning called Honoring the Original People of Seattle. So you guys are getting the presentation, there will be an e-learning that follows. And it was really to ensure that folks were giving land acknowledgements, yes, but also giving accurate and true land acknowledgements. I want to point out that there is known conflict among some of the Indigenous communities in Seattle area. And I think that folks oftentimes leave out certain tribes and communities, and they are uncomfortable because they don't really understand the dilemma and the problem at place. So the point of this resource is to give folks an accurate and true land acknowledgement that is vetted by the mayor's office through Tim and through Canoes, and to know that you have a true and accurate land acknowledgement out there. And what I'm referring to is the original stewards of Seattle are Duwamish people. However, some folks are giving land acknowledgements not understanding what Duwamish people includes. When I say Duwamish, I am talking about federally recognized tribe Muckleshoot, federally recognized tribe Suquamish, the Duwamish Tribal Organization, and several Duwamish people who are now Tulalip tribal members. So just a little history lesson here. When colonization happened in this area, there was 2 treaties involved, the Medicine Creek Treaty, and these treaties pushed Duwamish people to Suquamish and to Muckleshoot mostly. Some stayed and some went to Tulalip. But what's happening is I oftentimes cringe because I hear land acknowledgements really solely focused on the Duwamish Tribal Organization and leaving out the federally recognized tribes. And what that does is it causes further harm because the city of Seattle is in a government to government relationship with those 2 federally recognized tribes, the Muckleshoot and the Suquamish Indian tribes. And so as city employees, we can't leave out the federally recognized tribes. Yes, Muckleshoot now sits on the land between Auburn and Enumclaw, but those Duwamish people are original stewards of Seattle as well. So is Suquamish. So this is a complex topic, and I think some folks avoid it because it's uncomfortable, but I think it's important that we have these conversations and that city employees understand as a city employee, you need to know what government to government relationship is. Unfortunately, fortunately, whatever your opinion might be, you have to put those aside and focus on who is in a government to government relationship. When you're thinking about your employment and your role as an employee, who should you be collaborating with when making decisions? And it really needs to be those federally recognized tribes. However, you'll notice when I show you the sample land acknowledgements, I choose to be inclusive, and I'm saying the people I co-developed, because Duwamish people are the original stewards as well. However, the Duwamish Tribal Organization is not in a government to government relationship. This is again a complex topic. I'm happy to schedule meetings further if you have any confusion or maybe just want to learn more. And along with that, it was to also ensure that folks were not giving performative land acknowledgements. I can always tell when someone was just kind of given a paper and they're reading it. And what that does is it causes further harm because sometimes you're reading things that are inaccurate. It's uncomfortable, it's jarring. And so when you are giving a land acknowledgement, it's really important that it comes from you and that you're comfortable reading the words on the paper or giving that land acknowledgement. And some of the ways that you can do that is making it personal to you. For example, when I was doing this resource, the workforce equity director, Chris, had reached out and he was like, hey, what do I do? I'm a language learner, so I have language posters all over my office area and I take language classes. Chris knows this. And so he's been pretty interested in Toolshootseed as well. And so I said, Chris, make it personal to you. What have you learned? What are you learning about? What are you curious about? When you give your land acknowledgement, make a point to speak about those things. So when he gave his land acknowledgement, he used the sample one that I gave, but he also made it personal and said, hey, there's also an additional resource from the Puyallup Indian tribe where they have these amazing audio and graphics and you can learn the language. And that was personal to him. So what's personal to him and personal to me might be different. At the end of this presentation, there's a ton of resources that you can dive into, and I implore you to find out what is personal to you about the land. I'm a plant person. I love all of the traditional plants of this area. I developed a plant curriculum, and so those are things that are really personal to me when I'm giving land acknowledgements. And again, it's not just for non-Indigenous people. Indigenous folks, we should always also give land acknowledgements if we're not on our own traditional land. And then I also want to point out there is some general pushback about land acknowledgements. I've been sent a few resources like, hey, I'm curious about this. And I want to point out the reason why there is pushback is because when people are giving performative or inaccurate land acknowledgements, it can cause further harm. And so it's also as if you're reading a paper saying, hey, we're here, we want to honor that, and that's it. That is causing further harm. And I can understand that pushback. But if you're giving a land acknowledgement in a good and meaningful way, then that's great. And there should be no pushback and you should know what you're talking about. So there's kind of ways to prevent that. And then when we're looking at the samples that I'm getting ready to show you here, I again want to point out, you'll notice they're inclusive. They include the Duwamish people. They include the Muckleshoot, which includes part of the Muckleshoot tribe is Duwamish, part of the Suquamish tribe is Duwamish. And so I chose, and the people I worked with chose to be inclusive, but we also chose to make a point to think about those federally recognized tribes and what that means as city employees. So I'm going to share the long land acknowledgement. Let's see if it's gonna let me. I'm gonna do screen two. Okay, perfect. So the long land acknowledgement, you guys will receive all of these after this session, but the long land acknowledgement is just a kind of longer version when you have a little bit more time. And when I say time, I also want to point out it's so important to make time, right? So you can look at your meeting agenda and be like, oh, we don't have time. Carve out that 5 minutes to give a meaningful land acknowledgement. That's the least we can do to honor the original people of this land. So I am going to go ahead and just read this for the sake, but go ahead and follow along. We would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish and Duwamish people and their descendants, including but not limited to the Muckleshoot Indian tribe and the federally recognized Suquamish tribe. They are the original, present, and future stewards of these lands and waters. We raise our hands and honor them with gratitude. We acknowledge the Treaty of Point Elliott and the Medicine Creek Treaty and understand the importance of these treaties as they preserve and protect Indigenous people in their sacred homelands. In the native language, Tulshut Seed, Duwamish means the people of the inside, meaning the native people living inside the bay or the Salish Sea. The Coast Salish and Duwamish people have lived, fished, hunted, and gathered on the ancestral lands and waters for thousands of years prior to the occupation of the greater Seattle area. They continue to do so today and lead activities related to reclamation, remediation, and stewardship in support of environmental justice for the lands that comprise Seattle and the adjacent watersheds flowing into the Salish Sea. You can read more about the Coast Salish and Duwamish people on their respective websites and learn about the treaties of this area, the languages spoken, and other resources on the following slide. Thank you for taking time to recognize and honor the truth of Coast Salish and Duwamish people as the original stewards of Seattle. And then this long land acknowledgement has additional resources, and that's where you're going to see the links to the tribes that Seattle refers to. And then there's links to the treaties as well as language resources, and then a language map that kind of shows you how language has shifted since colonization. My husband is Nooksack, and their language has like very few language speakers left. It's really sad. Lashutsi, there's a lot of amazing people doing a lot of work to revitalize the language. And so again, this is the long land acknowledgement. And then there is a shorter version. And I'm not going to read this because it's just shortened of the longer version. So this might be something you read when you've got a jam-packed meeting. But again, you're not just going to read it. You're going to add by sharing something that you've learned or you're learning or you're doing for the work in indigenizing and decolonizing. And then there's an email land acknowledgement. I was asked to create this, but I'm honestly not sure if folks in the city, you need to talk to your supervisors or the people that might be able to tell you whether you can add it or not. But it's just another slide where you can just be able to acknowledge within your email the Indigenous people of these lands. And so again, these are inclusive. It includes those federally recognized tribes, which is really important for the government to government relationship. It includes the Duwamish people, which is inclusive of the Duwamish tribal organization, Muckleshoot, Suquamish, and folks that also went to Tulalip. And so as we're transitioning from land acknowledgement, a land acknowledgement is an act of indigenizing. It's an act of indigenizing the workspace. And so you'll notice in that land acknowledgement, I use the word Salish Sea. Can anyone else tell me what Salish Sea, what I'm referring to?
Puget Sound.
Yes, exactly. So I implore you that instead of saying the Puget Sound, say the Salish Sea. That is a way of indigenizing just kind of that terminology. And so as Indigenous people, we always refer to it as the Salish Sea. And so when I'm talking about indigenizing and decolonizing, I think folks are like, well, what's the difference? How are they the same? Are they different? And so the way that I always broke it down for folks is decolonizing is breaking a system apart. So breaking colonized systems and institutions apart, and indigenizing is bringing indigenous ways of knowing, thinking, and feeling into non-indigenous places. So when I have the language in the office and I introduce myself in Tulshutsi, I'm indigenizing that workplace. When you're saying the Salish Sea, that's indigenizing, and decolonizing is breaking apart those systems. And so I am always actively decolonizing my work team. I work on a lovely team of all women on the learning and development team, and I'm always challenging phrases that we say and ways that we do things. And it's really fun when you start to kind of shift and think about what you can be doing to decolonize and indigenize. And so when we're thinking about indigenizing and decolonizing, we also got to be comfortable with the term settler colonialism. I think some people get squirmy, and it's like that is a term, and it's fine. It's the forcible erasure of Indigenous people, and we need to be able to say it because that's the reality. Culture and language, like I mentioned, those boarding schools, language was stripped from many Indigenous communities, and it's to protect and maintain the superiority of Western ways of knowing and being, and that's why that decolonizing that system and indigenizing it is so important, because we've been forced to think certain ways. And even as an Indigenous person, I perpetuate colonialism in so many ways. I really like holidays, and I do all the decorations, and so I'll like catch myself and be like, oh, what can I do to decolonize this? Because I'm totally perpetuating colonialism right now. And so when we're thinking of colonization, it's a practice of domination and taking over land that is not your own by using force. It is motivated by economics and led by white supremacy. And what is decolonizing? Like I mentioned, it's breaking apart. So decolonizing is reflecting on how systems, institutions, and yourself perpetuate settler colonialism. So it's taking the time to think about how you, and also, your organization and the other systems you're a part of, how do you perpetuate settler colonialism? What can you do to deconstruct that? And indigenizing is bringing in indigenous ways of knowing, thinking, feeling, and being. So when I was at Muckleshoot, I facilitated a lot of staff trainings out on the land. That was my way of indigenizing. I'm going to get folks out there and we're going to have conversations, but we're going to be uncomfortable on the land. And so that was something I did when I worked with Muckleshoot. And so again, indigenizing is bringing indigenous ways in, decolonizing is breaking apart settler colonialism within systems. And so this kind of shows you an image of what acts could be considered indigenizing or decolonizing. And so it's reflecting on your own, when you're thinking of decolonizing, reflecting on your own beliefs and behaviors. So like I mentioned, the holiday thing, I'm like, oh, I really pay a lot of money into this holiday thing. What can I do? And so I do a no spend January. I do little things to like kind of bring myself in. When you notice problematic information or content being shared, actively challenge it. Speak up. Critically analyzing your managerial approach and philosophy and how it perpetuates settler colonialism. This is something that's really big to me. Like, think about how you show up as a manager and a leader, and what can you do to decolonize that? Examine existing personnel policies to ensure that they're collaborative. Indigenous ways is being very collaborative, and not one person knowing all the things, but really coming together and bringing our skill sets to the table. Creating opportunities for Indigenous language learners to become compensated in the language program. That was brought up by a CNUS member. They're like, we need to create these opportunities for folks learning the language because they're a part of that revitalization. Be more collaborative instead of in silos. I think that's been the hardest part of being in the city for me, is everything is so siloed. And I really love working collaboratively. And when we're thinking about indigenizing, it's working in collaboration with the local tribes and communities. It's taking that step. And like I mentioned, the Tribal Nations program that I'll be developing, that will really help folks know how to do that and take the steps to do it. Write and read a localized land acknowledgement, which hopefully y'all can do at the end of this presentation. Learn what the original language of the land that you are on and learn some of the phrases. My boss has been with the city since September, and I've got her introducing herself, greeting, departing in Tulshutseed, and it's really awesome. And also like greet and introduce yourself in your first language or in the language of the land. So I know some folks' first languages might be Spanish or French, and like normalize introducing yourself in that language. Like we don't have to just speak English. Like there are other ways of doing this and showing up authentically. And again, partner with local tribes whenever possible. And so as I'm talking about indigenizing and decolonizing, I know it's kind of a lot of information to digest, but there is going to be additional resources for you to consider. How can you indigenize the workplace and like what can you actively do? And I will just say we are very fortunate to live in the area that we do because the local tribes have spent a lot of time and money to develop incredible resources to educate folks about their history and presence. And so those are linked within here. This video, Kalina Lawrence, it's a Tulshutseed song on the Salish Sea. Myself and my family are actually in the video, but it's a song that's fully in Tulshutseed. It's beautiful. All My Relations podcast, amazing. I also developed an indigenized meditations site that is available citywide. So if you want to do a meditation with your team, there's meditations on there. And there's just a ton of other resources that you can dive into to kind of learn more about how you can indigenize your workspace and even your personal life. And then these are just some references. Like I mentioned earlier, this was a co-developed resource. It was developed in a good way, collaborating with a lot of different Indigenous folks and having lots of eyes on it. But there was also some references that I used throughout the process when developing. So those are just also here as well. And so this is the time where you guys can ask some questions, maybe share some thoughts. Again, I know it's a lot to digest.
It is a lot, but thank you so much. I know I am personally intrigued by a lot of what you said, and I know I have a few questions, but I want to offer the opportunity for someone else, either here in the room or joining us on the virtual platform, to start with any questions you may have with Rita. Just don't be heard. Questions or comments or reactions?
Yeah.
I am so appreciative of you being here with us, Rita, and sharing this knowledge and information and perspective with us. I'm kind of blown away, just like trying to take in all of what you're saying and gonna follow up with a lot of these links. I do have a specific question. You mentioned at the top of your presentation about this 2% of the current U.S. population being American Indians and Alaska Natives should not be used against Indigenous people in recruiting and retention data. And maybe that's a question that would take a while to answer, but I wonder if you could tell me just like a little bit more about that. And if not, I'll follow up with you outside of this meeting.
I had the exact question.
Yeah, I'm gonna like try to say this as best I can. So it was actually when I was in the review process, it was brought up by a CNUS member that like it was a little jarring. It was like, holy cow, like is that real? And then the reaction was, I don't know if I want that shared because what if it's used against us in recruiting us for employment and retaining us? Because we're such a small percentage, you know, is that going to be used against us when trying to retain employees because we're such a small percentage? So that note was added in there because there was a particular CNUS member that was just taken back by that statistic. So just really thinking and being mindful. The new the SHR workforce strategic plan, I think is getting ready to come out or has come out. I've seen it because I had eyes on it. And so it kind of addresses some of that and just the importance in recruiting and retaining Indigenous people and finding opportunities to promote them and to grow them. A lot of Indigenous folks, we obviously are a small percentage, unfortunately, on Turtle Island, but also a lot of Indigenous folks don't go to college. It's really hard to leave the res, and like there's just that's a whole complex thing. And so it was just really important to note when sharing this presentation, like don't use that 2% against us.
Okay, I think I know what you're saying.
Yes, I'm happy to do a follow-up if you need.
I want to let Commissioner McMillan in here. I see your hand up.
I just had one quick question. You mentioned a couple of treaties a few times, and those are new to me. Can you tell me who those treaties were made between? Who are the
Yeah,
parties to those treaties, and what
yeah.
do they?
Yes, so I usually try to touch on those a little bit, but because of time, I wanted to give more time for questions. But thank you for bringing that up. There are two treaties that pertain to the greater Seattle area, and that's the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. And that treaty gave land to like the Puyallup tribe, Nisqually, and Squaxin. But what happened was is that treaty didn't give them land connected to the waterways. And the waterways are so important for the way of life and fishing and whatnot. And so then the Treaty of Point Elliott came out in 1855 because Duwamish wasn't included. So Duwamish was kind of waiting around like, well, where are we going to go? What's going to happen? Then the Treaty of Point Elliott happened in 1855. And that's where the Muckleshoot Indian tribe was developed and the Suquamish Indian tribe was developed and the Tulalip Indian tribe was developed. Puyallup got more land on the river. But that Treaty of Point Elliott is where the Duwamish people were divided up. And so that's why you see Duwamish include Muckleshoot, Suquamish, Tulalip, and the Duwamish Tribal Organization. Yeah, no problem.
I will say that one of my big takeaways and a new learning for me in this conversation is kind of the history and the context of the purpose of land acknowledgements going back generations. And so thank you for that. And kind of with that said, I do know that kind of in contemporary times as this idea of land acknowledgements in the workplace have come about, some organizations, I don't know how much this happens around the city anymore, but are combining a land acknowledgement with a racial equity commitment, for example. And so that is starting to feel to me at some level is a bit disrespectful. And so I'm just curious, is that dynamic being noticed and how are people, how's that being addressed and or
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up. Like I mentioned, this resource started because I'm a change team member, and I even make a point on learning and development. We decide who's doing what bucket of work, and when we went to present doing the Tribal Nations program, my director said, "Well, that's a part of racial equity." And I pushed against that and I said, it's separate, it's different. Like honoring the indigenous people, it's just a different bucket. And I'm happy to have a private off the record conversation a little more about that. But it really should be separate because we should be pausing. The point of the land acknowledgement is to pause and to honor indigenous people's past and their presence and the resiliency. And so I haven't personally seen them combined yet, but our change team has had conversations and we are very much on the same page that they're two separate things, and that it's really important to honor indigenous people separately. And like I mentioned, carve that time out even when you have a jam-packed agenda. So yeah, I think it's, if you ask someone else, they might say something different. My perspective and what you'll see coming out in the Tribal Nations program is that it's a very separate topic, and it's just really important to honor indigenous people and language revitalization in a different way.
thank you. All right, any other questions for Rita? Comments? Well, I do want to, on behalf of the commission, thank you again, Rita, for spending this time with us and for all that it took to kind of get us to this point. But also, and probably more importantly, just for the richness of your sharing and your transparency with us and all of these resources that you've provided us. I think it is a lot to process and to kind of take in. And so I want to make sure that we have time and opportunity to do that individually and hopefully be able to revisit it just in terms of our purposes, which was to take a look now at our land acknowledgement as commission, make some choices and decisions about how we move forward. And so I know I've learned a lot and have some thoughts about how we might, refine this practice for the commission. So we'll table that for later. So if there are no other questions or comments.
Yeah, I also have like a post survey, and so if that's okay, you don't need to do it now, but if you, I can add it in the email too. If you can just make sure to fill that out, and I think I just want to highlight the biggest thing I want you to take away is like you're going to have these sample land acknowledgements given to you, right? But it's really important to make it personal to you and to the commission and like be able, like whether it's Andrea giving it or someone else, like they should look slightly different, right? It should be personal to that person in that moment, that like what is on your mind, what have you been taking time to do, because that's the step that makes it not performative. It makes it authentic. And so I'm going to give you those samples. I will make sure to email that to Teresa when I get off, and you'll have this whole slide deck with all of the information. And I'm always available. This is the work I'm really passionate about, so please don't hesitate to reach out. And like I mentioned earlier, this resource is going to be developed into an e-learning. So it's going to be like a 30-minute e-learning that can be shared out and available to all city members. It's going to look different than this, but it's going to be kind of that same content, and you should be able to leave with the same resource by the end. And then I also just want to point out, when we're thinking of the government to government relationships that I talked about, we as a city and city employees, we are in a government to government relationship with Muckleshoot and Suquamish because of their sovereignty and because they are their own government. And I think some folks don't quite understand that government to government and sovereignty. Those are complex terms, but the easiest way I can explain it is like Muckleshoot has their own government. They have their own like government within the U.S. So when they're working with the U.S., it's a government to government. The U.S. is not above them. They are equals, and they work collaboratively to do things. And so that sovereignty is so important, because when you are on sovereign land, when you step on the res, you are not just in the U.S. You are on Muckleshoot land. You are on Suquamish land, and you follow their laws and their rules. And I think so many folks that are non-Indigenous haven't experienced what that means to be on sovereign land. And having worked at Muckleshoot, being Indigenous, being on my sovereign land, it's really important that non-Indigenous people know that sovereignty. Like, they get to make their own rules, and it's going to be different depending on each tribe, right? Each tribe decides what their enrollment is going to be, what those rules for enrollment are going to be, what their laws are, what their police officers, what their schools look like. And so I also want you to take away that importance of sovereignty. And again, those are big terms. Happy to debrief if you have questions after. But I really appreciate you guys having me here and reaching out. I think it was Andrew. I think it was you that had mentioned having me come. So thank you so much. This is work I'm really passionate about, and I appreciate being invited into this space. I think it's important to have Indigenous voices, and especially because a resource like this was co-developed with so many amazing Indigenous folks.
Thank you so much, Rita. We really appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to drop the survey in the chat, but I'll also put it in the email that I send to Teresa. Again, I'm in learning and development. Data matters, so please do the survey. Would appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Right. Take care.
And Twilshoot Seed, when we depart, we say hoi. Hoi.
Hoi, hoi. All right, thank you. All right, well, wow, well, that was great. That was great. Yeah. Thank you all for your time and attention to that. We are going to, in the interest of time, move us on the agenda to, hang on, here it is. Okay. All right, so we are at number 6, action items, which are the commission vote on the 2024 meeting schedule. You'll find that on page 18 of your packet. So let's take a moment and go to that document. This was presented at the last meeting, but we did not have all commissioners present, so we deferred this conversation to this meeting so that we might make a decision and vote on the meeting dates. And so I think, now, so is this, this is updated based on the conversations that we had in the last meeting, correct? Yes. And so at that meeting, there was at least one date that Commissioner Caesar was unavailable, and a tentative date, for, that I brought forward. And so Commissioner McMillan, I want to offer you the opportunity to, review the dates, and if there are any conflicts with any of these that we might need to know about.
Oh, I see her. Yeah. Commissioner McMillan, are you there?
Maybe she had to step away. Doesn't look like she's muted.
With the little thing on her screen so you can see she is listed.
Well.
Oh, okay, I'm here, everybody. I'm here. I turned my video off because I'm looking at the calendar again. I'm sorry. Then I couldn't then I couldn't switch back. I just need to double check one of these dates again because I think I might have had a change. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Just for you.
Okay, I think I did say I was not going to be available in March. But all the other dates are still good for me.
Okay, so these are all still Monday dates, correct? So our, okay, except
March
for
is a
March.
Tuesday.
Yeah. And this was a special meeting
Because
it was, but why did we?
well, we'd eliminate the word special if we adopted that date.
Right, but I'm just curious why we selected a holiday. Okay.
Oh, it's either a holiday or I can't be it.
Except for
That's for March.
Just to clarify on the schedule that's in the packet. So what you would be doing today would be adopting the schedule for the rest of the year as your regular meeting schedule. So
Yes.
that the reference to the March 25th is a special, that would not be a special, that'd be a regular, because all these would be regular meeting dates, and the bylaws or your rules provide you to meet monthly unless there's no business. So you could just set it as it's done there once, one meeting per month, and if you need to cancel a meeting because there's no business, and you can do that. But this schedule sets up one meeting per month.
Right, okay, yeah, and I think that's what Andrew was just saying too, we wouldn't consider March 25th a special meeting, it's just our regular meeting.
That's right, that's right, yes.
Okay.
March is not, it's not a holiday. I'm just not here on the 18th. So I think we just opted.
So we opted to just move by 1 week. Okay,
Yes.
all right.
I mean, it would be okay with me to do it on the 18th if Commissioner McMillan was available.
The 18th and 25th right now are both off for me.
Oh. And I'm gone, and also because I'm out of the office the 11th to the 19th, so there would be, I would be able to just.
All right,
Oh, that's what it was.
so we could keep this list the way it is, and to Joe's point, the idea is that we are voting on these dates as our regular schedule, which is one meeting per month, recognizing that we can make rescheduling decisions and choices based on content of, the meeting need and all of that, okay? All right, so with that said, I'll entertain a motion with regard to the 2024 meeting dates.
I so move the meeting dates as provided for. I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you for that. And now let's go back to page now 19, which is our next order of business, and that is the selection of chair. And can you want to talk us through that?
Sure. Every year, each commission here the Civil Service Commission shall elect a chair. This is according to the Civil Service Commission Rules of Practice and Procedure, which you have on page 19 in your materials. The commissioner that serves as chair, works with me and other commission staff, along with the other members of the commission, to sort of lead the work of the commission and also to typically lead the meetings. It is okay for a chair to miss a meeting if they need to do so. We have had the happy experience of other commissioners stepping up to chair a meeting on a case-by-case as needed basis. Commissioner Weidman-Williams has been the chair for 2023. She's been a great job. Our practice together has been that we do meet approximately a week before each meeting, and then on an as-needed basis to discuss commission business, the meeting agenda, any initiatives that we're working on together in the year. But I think as you both know, I meet with other commissioners as they wish or as needed. Also, so it's a leadership position, but well supported by our Civil Service Commission staff and the other commissioners.
Okay. So I can't remember, frankly, from last time. Do we have to move for nominations?
Yeah.
Or
I think it's been
first, there were the questions about this role and what's been provided here in writing, as well as what Director Shealy has provided us. If there's any questions. Okay. Then we will open it up for nominations for the chair for 2024. And I would like to nominate Commissioner McMillan for the chair position for 2024.
Second.
Well, she needs to accept the nomination. Right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I accept. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion. I will move that Commissioner McMillan be appointed chair of the Civil Service Commission for 2024. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Yay. 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 Congratulations, Commissioner McMillan.
Thank you.
I have said separately to Director Shealy, and I will say here publicly that I'm happy to provide whatever support I can in terms of transition and handoff and backup and all that good stuff. So thank you, and look forward to being under your leadership, beginning with the March meeting.
Okay, I look forward to helping out in that capacity, with the reminder, of course, that as of right now, I likely will not be at the March meeting unless something changes on my calendar, but all others should be just fine. And while I'm here, this reminds me that I neglected at the beginning to welcome Commissioner Caesar. I'm sorry I wasn't here last week when you were properly welcomed by everybody else, but I just wanted to say, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so with those two items resolved, I'll ask if there's a need to move into executive session.
No, there's not.
Okay. All right, thank you. Then we'll move to item number 7, updates and discussion. We'll first start with the executive director of budget and departmental updates, and then we can just move straight into the case updates as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Weidman-Williams, and I'll keep these items brief. We do not have a budget report in our packet, as I did promise last month, but the materials were not available by the time of publication of the budget. Of the meeting packet. But my budget update is that I met with our CBO analyst today to launch, development of the 2025-2026 budget. Sarah Butler is going to be supporting me in that work this year and going forward. So, there will be some changes for 2025. It remains to be seen what those will be, but more to come. For departmental update, I'll give the case status report in a bit. There have been some changes there, but we continue to have lots and lots of work on the public safety side. We've gotten, not as a result, but related to a rule change that the CSC adopted late last year. We do have some work regarding requests for reinstatement to the eligible register, more of that than we typically have, although we do receive those regularly. And lots of focus on entry-level police officer. We're ramping up for the work on the firefighter exam. Applications will be in the latter part of 2024, and that's a huge body of work. And we have one disciplinary appeal in the Public Safety Civil Service Commission, which is moving forward at a nice, regular pace. I'll move to the case status report for civil service. That's on page 20 of your packet. Thanks for putting this packet together so beautifully, Teresa. The first item is case number 23-01003, and that is the LaFazia Garrity v. HSD matter. If you continue to the following pages on your appeal, you will have learned, or you will learn now, that HSD and Ms. LaFazia Garrity did come to a resolution a mutually agreeable resolution in that matter. The appellant requested to withdraw her appeal, and it was dismissed by us on the 8th of February. So that matter will move down on the case status report to the dismissed and closed section by the next meeting. The Reichenbach v. SPU matter, that is CSC number 23-03002. The parties have engaged or are still engaging in motions practice. The city filed a motion to dismiss, and a response and a reply have been filed. I will be reviewing those materials in February and heading towards a ruling on that motion, hopefully. So more to come. That concludes the case status report for this meeting.
Any questions for Director Shealy? Okay, thank you. You're welcome. That brings us to any old or new business that anyone has to offer at this point. Okay, hearing none, then that moves us to item number 9, which is adjournment. It is 3:38 p.m. and we are officially adjourned. Thank you all for your attendance today in this very full and rich meeting. See you all next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.